Hello, everyone. It's Religious Fanboy here again, and it's January, and I have free time in uploading schedule. So, with that being said, it is issue number 1 month yet again. Woo! Uh, it'll be, it's gonna be fun, and we're kicking it off, celebrating our 7th year of Religious Fanboy in this ministry the same way we started it, with a Red Hood comic book. Woo! I also admit to, as far as comic book people that talk about comics on YouTube, I admit that if I had been passing the Tim test, I've officially failed the Tim test. Um, but um, I'm I really enjoyed this issue. I'm gonna pull up the notes on my phone. I genuinely was excited because like I was hooked when they advertised concept in this cover. Just like, look at how pretty that cover art is. It's great. I like it a lot. It's cool. I don't know how the electrical bars work. It's just cool. Um, so I'm gonna start with brief synopsis, kind of summary of what happens in the comics. Um, Red Hood is brought in to lead a team of zombified Batman villains after an explosion at and the destruction of Arkham Asylum. And the main theme and message that has Christian parallels in this issue is the concept and the importance of acknowledging the responsibility and the aspects of servitude that come with any level of authority in at any leadership position. And we see this play out in many levels. Um, I'm gonna go ahead and get to the text for this video, which is in I will be reading out of the English Standard Version of, and the passages from is Romans chapter 15 verses 1 through 3, that says, "We who are strong have an obligation to bear the failings of the weak, and not to please ourselves. Let each of us please his neighbor for his good, to build him up. For Christ did not please himself, but as it is written, the reproaches of those who reproach fell on me." The leadership requires the first kind of talking point is that leadership requires us to surrender and lay down our self interested desires and forces us to prioritize the needs of those below us and those that we lead, to make sure their needs are being met. Like, and this applies for any. In this comic, we see that at differing levels with the sketchy organization, which Red Hood rightfully calls out, been like, "Hey, this sounds like a bad idea. Zombies don't really have, like, since they're pretty well mindless, with if they don't have enough of this kind of like drug that they've made that they inject into the zombies to help them be like maintain like sanity and cognitive brain function to a point. um this could be potentially, and usually as we've seen here, reckless, like, and potentially harmful. Like Crazy Quilt, the person that they were supposed to bring in, was almost killed and or eaten by two of the four zombies that were working with Red Hood at the time. Both Bane because he had been betrayed by Crazy Quilt recently, and Man Bat because he wanted to eat him. Um, and this also implies to like the zombies, like they are put in a position of authority to like bring in criminals and presumably protect the innocent. Um, and also the organization, like, well, Red Hood's in charge of making sure the zombies aren't going to the extreme and like eating people. And the organization is, whether it is regardless of how they feel about it and how they view their sketchy practices, they are responsible for the lives of the criminals being brought in, as well as the lives of the zombified bat villains and also Red Hood. And we see how this is the unethicalness that is done through the basically the organization's desire to fulfill their own means and do things the way that seems to be most beneficial to them, regardless of safety. Um, but this is, and in contrast to this, we have in the Bible great examples of like the in the text it talks about primarily leaders' responsibility of encouragement, like Jesus did for the 12, and how he had taught and built them up and encouraged them for that when the time came for him to leave, that they would be ready. Like also like Paul, who is thought to have written the book of Romans, which is a series of letters that would have been written to a church in Rome or to multiple churches in Rome, where we talk about mostly encouragement, and based on what is said in chapter 16, we can imply that they had a pretty healthy relationship and good relationship with the church in Rome. Um, and we also see this positive more positive, friendly conversation through the letters, and also the book of Thessalonians, First and Second Thessalonians. Um, and there's like contrast to this, it's like in the book of Galatians, where it is a lot of rebuking about the corrupting nature of false doctrine. Um, and we also can relate in and see the importance of balance with leadership position, where with Red Hood, where he is concerned, we can see that he's concerned for people like Crazy Quilt during the interrogation and on the mission, where he almost gets killed and eaten on two separate occasions by two different members of Red Hood's team. And in the interrogation almost gets eaten. Crazy Quilt almost gets eaten and is threatened to be eaten by another one of the Batman villains on his team, the Arkham Knight. Um, and we see how like we see examples of this with Paul, where he said that I'm in letters where it's like, oh, I'm sorry, I wish I could be with you, but I can't, either due to like in those situations, like he was suffering persecutions and was usually in and out of prisons. Like if he wasn't teaching somewhere, he was else when writing these letters. He was usually in prison. Um, and we also see throughout Paul's letters, and we actually get a name credit of one of the people, kind of seems to imply that it's co-writer on this letter, um, Timothy, which was one of the kind of not necessarily disciples, but they were students that their mentor was Paul, and some other people along with Timothy, like another person along with Timothy was Titus, who both of these are close friends and students of Paul that also have their own books that are also thought to be letters that were written possibly by Paul to presumably to them, and we can interpret that based on how it seems to go, especially towards the end of those books, where it seems like where it's coming close to Paul's martyrdom, and he is giving like final words of encouragement and love towards them as they continue on in their ministries, and Paul's comes to an end here on earth as he is eventually martyred. He's thought to be him and the disciple Peter are thought to be Christians that were martyred by Emperor Nero. Um, and that is also where we see the importance, like with the talking about how Paul wasn't always available and would send other people. We also can get extrapolate from that the importance of delegation and making sure people are prepared. We see this to varying levels, like with Jesus instructing people when they were the 12 disciples when he had sent them out, and like the difference where he said, I'm sending you like sheep among wolves. That doesn't mean that Jesus is not, God isn't protecting them, but it does, he is telling them to acknowledge the dangers, like when whitewater rafting, you don't hope and anticipate the like worst case scenario, because that's depressing, but like you don't rule out the possibility of it. Like you develop a safe respect, like Jason Todd and that family, especially Jason Todd, he's one of the Robins that has died before. And like he knows worst case scenario and desires to naturally and fairly protect himself. So when he's working in unsafe conditions and there are issues with the mission of people like both criminals and innocent people being in danger because he's working with zombies, um, that it is necessary as a leader to be careful, like kind of referencing what I do. I work to be careful. Like I'm gonna let you know that like, oh, this issue, though it is interesting, like there is some scary images, and it is, there's a rating on here of age 13 plus, so it's for teens and older, which makes sense because it would scare potentially younger children. And that doesn't mean that the messages might not be prevalent, but it means that, oh, we should be aware of this. Like how we also talk about anime as an act and watching it and discussing it as a way of worshiping God. And that means that regardless of who watches these videos, I greatly appreciate you, you guys for watching these videos. If I, I assume you are, if you're hearing this. Um, but it is important that I pay attention to what I'm recommending because by talking about this stuff, I am recommending it to you, and regardless of if I say, oh, you should watch it or not, I am talking about it and in a way promoting it by doing so. So there's a sense of accountability with that to make sure that I'm stewarding that well, and that also applies for other professions such as politicians that have responsibility to and are expected to have the best interests at heart of all citizens, both those who voted for them and those who are on the fence and those who also did not have any intention of voting for them and might even be still angry about the outcomes. And that's, they are citizens regardless. And so it is important, and it is brought up in the Bible many times, that few are called to be leaders and few are called to be teachers because of the level of scrutiny and responsibility that comes with that. Because if you desire a leadership position, it means that though you experience the power and status that comes with being seen as a leader, it also means you are a servant to those who look to you to guidance and will be held accountable by them and for them. And with that being said, the next week's video will be on issue number 1 of Tom King's run on Mr. Miracle. And I hope you guys had a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And with that being said, Meg, I hope and pray that you take away from this video whatever God intends for you to take away from it. And with that being said, may God be with you, and I will see you next time. Bye.